And now for something completely different. Well, different than my other videos anyway. Tonight I want to talk about a kind of unusual film reviews. I'm going to review what I refer to, and others also, as science fiction noir. Um, if one considers the subject of film noir as a genre, then you realize that it covers many areas, including things like westerns, romances, and even science fiction. The following five films, for me anyway, fit into that category, and I know a lot of other people agree. Some of these you may have heard of, and some of them are a little bit more obscure. The first one that I really noticed as a classic science fiction noir was actually produced by Hammer Films, famous British horror studio, but they did produce science fiction as well. And it's called The Four-Sided Triangle. It was written and directed by Terence Fisher, and also written by uh, Paul Tabori. And it stars Barbara Payton, who was in quite a few film noirs, gorgeous, tall, blonde, Joan Van Essen, and James Hayter. And the story is told in flashback, which is a typical noir trope. It's about two boys who are both in love with the same girl, and that girl being played by Payton. Peyton's name is Lena, and two scientists, Bill and Robin, are working on something they call a reproducer. What the reproducer does is it can reproduce physical objects, so they can make an exact copy of any physical object. As in both Bill and Robin are in love with Lena, and I believe she chooses Bill, which puts Robin into sort of a case of distress, and he convinces her to enter the reproducer so he can create a different version of her that will love him. Well, it doesn't work out that way. Both of them love Bill, and now Robin's really upset, and eventually there's a fire at the reproducer overheats, and it catches fire and destroys the laboratory. And two people are killed, a man and a woman. And one of them they know is Bill, but they don't know if the girl is Lena or her duplicate, who's been known as Helen. And eventually, Bill remembers that he had to give Helen an electric shock to wipe out her memory so that Robin could fall in love with her. And there were two marks on the back of her neck. And he checks the girl who survived the fire, and there are no marks. It's Lena who survives. It's the girl who's after all. Very, very noir film. It's really good. It's black and white, and well directed, well written, and very well acted. I highly recommend it. Next one is one of the strangest films I've ever seen. Very, very noir. It's called She-Devil. It's from 1957. Stars the very beautiful Marie Blanchard and Jack Kelly, Albert Decker, who you may know from a lot of films, Joan Archer and Faye Baker. And it's John Archer, I'm sorry, Faye Baker. And it's a story that's really bizarre. It has this kind of Frankenstein-like plot. There are these two doctors, and one of them is working on serum, which can create adaptations in organisms that are ill. He's cured a cat with a broken spine and a leopard that had a torn paw using this serum, and he thinks it can be applied to humans as well, but the other doctor objects. He doesn't think it should ever be used on humans. It's too dangerous. Eventually, he keeps badgering, and he relents that only if somebody A, agreed to have the serum used on them, and B, if it was an absolutely hopeless case, somebody who had no chance of life unless they were given this serum, well, they find such a person. That person is Kira, played by Marie Blanchard, who's dying of tuberculosis in a poor people's hospital. She's impoverished and can't afford any better treatment. And she agrees to be injected by the serum. Well, At first, it doesn't seem like it's working or that it's doing anything. She's still dying, and eventually, very slowly, she begins to recover. And to the amazement of her doctors, staff at the hospital, she recovers. She makes a complete recovery. There's no sign of tuberculosis in her anymore. The scientists decide to, they release her and decide they're going to help her out. I think they give her a little bit of money and for kind of an old, but not fairly nice dress to wear. And uh, she goes out and she's going to buy something nice. She's going to buy like a new hat. The few dollars that they've given her goes into a very fancy store, and then she starts to realize she can use this adaptive ability. She sees a rich man having clothes modeled for him by some very attractive models, and she hits him over the head and steals the money that he was going to give to these girls. And the police put out a bulletin for a brunette wearing a kind of a rumpled dress. Well, she uses this adaptability to change into a blonde, and she steals a dress and is now wearing something very elegant. They say, "Oh, that's not her. That doesn't look like her at all." Well, she goes back to the scientist, which really has no place else to turn. And they realize that, what did you do? She says, "Oh, I spent all day at the beauty parlor. I wanted to, make myself look nice for you." Well, the younger scientist, the one who invented the serum, Dr. Scott, falls in love with her and, is starting to try to woo her. But the older doctor is kind of suspicious. He thinks there's something strange going on. Especially when he reads this thing about, the police are looking for this woman in this tattered dress. He says, "Wasn't that the dress you were wearing when we met you?" She says, "Well, it looks like it, but it could be any dress. There are lots of copies of that dress." Well, he can't really disprove that, so he doesn't really have any proof that she's the girl who hit the guy over the head and took the money. Then things start to develop as the young doctor starts to fall in love with her, but they throw her a very fancy party, and she meets an attractive millionaire, basically played by John Archer, and his wife Faye Baker is kind of constantly upset that he's always flirting with pretty girls at these parties, and he starts to flirt with Kira, naturally, because she's gorgeous, and she kind of catches them, and the wife slaps her in the face and says something like, "You're going to regret that," and waits until later, and then she's alone with the wife and changes herself back into a brunette who looks different than the way she looked before, and strangles her to death, and then runs off. She's wearing a cape, so people can't really see her face very well. Runs off into the night, changes herself back into a blonde, and comes back to the party and says, "What happened?" "Oh, somebody's been murdered." So, "Oh, that's terrible." Eventually, she ends up with John Archer and is living the lifestyle because he's like a billionaire and living this great lifestyle. But eventually, she starts to get bored with him, particularly his physical attention towards her. She's decided that she doesn't want to be with him anymore, but she still wants his money. So she deliberately arranges a car crash. He says, "Are you crazy? We're going to die." She said, "No, you're going to die." She's basically become indestructible. She can't be killed because of this adaptive ability that the serum gave. So, the car crashes and John Archer is killed, but she's not. And she walks away miraculously without a scratch. Cops are suspicious, but they can't prove anything. Now she goes back to the young scientist who was still in love with her and kept a portrait of her that she sent him her honeymoon, kept a room for her, and is still very much head over heels for her. And the older scientist, played by Albert Decker, starts, saying, "You got to do something. She's too dangerous, and this thing is starting to get out of control. And what can we do? There's nothing. She has this adaptive ability. There's really nothing we can do. It's, well, we can try giving her an operation to work antidote to the serum." Well, the younger scientist, starts, trying to work on the antidote, and then she seduces him out of it and destroys what he was working on, and tries to get him to agree to kill the Albert Decker character because he's the one who's standing in the way. Well, He pretends to go along, but he actually doesn't. He's actually appalled by the fact that she asked him to kill his best friend, mentor, and he won't do it. They finally figure out that they try knocking her out with drugs. The needle breaks on her arm, doesn't work. But they figure out that they've been looking at it all wrong. They've been trying to think up sophisticated solutions when a simple one would work. No being can exist in its own waste product. So if they pump in carbon dioxide, they can use that to knock her out, and then they can perform the operation, which they do, and she's knocked out, and they seal up her windows and passes out and perform the operation. And she subsequently not only transforms back into a brunette, but dies of tuberculosis as she was going to. A bit of a morality tale, but definitely has a noir overtones. I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend that. Third is a very strange movie called, it's released on a double bill, by the way, with She Devil, and it's directed by the same director, Kurt Newman, or Neumann, I'm not sure how it's so a story by Irving Block. It was written by Lawrence Goldman. Stars Jeff Morrow, Barbara Lawrence, who again was in quite a number of film noirs. And it was released by 20th Century Fox. And basically, what happens is an alien object crashes in the desert, and it's small object, and an unseen sort of an alien takes over the mind of a scientist and makes him drive it to this scientific laboratory, where it then leaves him and takes over the mind of the head scientist. And subsequently, an object is spotted in space, a much larger object that crashes into the ocean off the Gulf of Mexico. They try to shoot it down, but it's affected. And a giant robot emerges, and it's just really weird. It's like there's basically just two square blocks on top of each other. Very strange and weird looking. It has two antennae on top. For a long time, it doesn't do anything. It just sits there and doesn't move. And they go down, Jeff Morrow and Bart Lawrence go down to the Gulf of Mexico to investigate this thing, and start to realize that it's absorbing energy. It destroys an atomic energy plant, and there's no radioactivity because it's absorbed all the way, and then it starts getting larger and larger as it's starting to do this. And scientists back in the lab start sending it information about where all their power sites are in Mexico, and it starts traveling towards them to absorb energy. They're going to try and destroy it with an atomic bomb, and they drop it, and it doesn't work. It just absorbs the energy. Finally, they realize that maybe if they reverse the polarity of this robot, that it will be destroyed, and they managed to get aboard the robot and reverse the robot's polarity. It's very strange. It doesn't have a lot of noir elements other than the fact that the main couple are kind of sexy, and they have sexy romance going on. But again, very strange movie. It's gotten kind of a cult following. Again, I recommend seeing. Number 4 is a bit more obscure. It's from 1964. It's called Frozen Alive, and it was directed by Bernard Knowles. It stars Mark Stevens, Marianne Koch, and Wolfgang Lutzke, and Delphi Lawrence, with a joint UK and German production. The plot is about there are these two scientists, Frank Overton and Helen Whelan, played by Mark Stevens and Marianne Koch. And they are successful in performing a series of freezing experiments on chimpanzees. They've frozen them for 3 months and then brought them back to life with no ill effects. And they think this can potentially have a application for humans too, to freeze people and send them on a long space voyage, and then they'd wake up at the end, and then they'd still be unharmed and wouldn't have age. And the organization that they work for strictly forbids them from using it on humans. They give them a prize for doing what the chimpanzees say, I'm allowed to use this. Well, Frank is insistent, and he basically through subterfuge, substitutes himself for a chimpanzee who's supposed to be frozen. He and Helen have are kind of in love, but he's married to a drunk journalist, and that's the one played by Delphi Lawrence, and she also has a lover, and she really won't let him continue with the romance, but he insists, and as I say, he has himself frozen. Meanwhile, the wife is kind of despondent, and she kills herself, and with his gun. So now the cops are kind of suspecting that he did it, but he was frozen at the time, so he couldn't have done it. They find out about this, and they demand that he be, unfrozen, and he is, and it's proven, that he couldn't have done it because of the experiment. Again, there's a classic, love triangle and a very typical film noir plot. Last one is the strangest, and I can't even really describe it. It's really bizarre. It's Alphaville by the wonderful Jean-Luc Goddard, written and directed by Jean-Luc Goddard. And it stars Eddie Constantine as Lemmy Caution. It was a character he played in other films as this kind of wisecracking, typical 1950s detective, with a trench coat and a fedora hat. He shows up in this town called Alphaville, which is France somewhere. He's driving a Ford Galaxy. I thought that was kind of a funny joke in there. There are no real special effects in this movie except basically the voice of the computer Alpha 60, which is the dictator who runs Alphaville. And all emotion is banned from this fictional city of Alphaville. No love, no poetry, no free thought is allowed. They have a dictionary that they keep updating with new terms that are banned. Anyone who's found to show emotion is instantly executed under the orders of Alpha 60. Well, Lemmy is sent in to do two things. He's supposed to find a scientist named Henry Dixon, and I wonder if that's kind of a joke on Gordon Dixon and or Philip K. Dick. I'm not sure, but and he's also supposed to find and kill Professor von Braun, who is the inventor of Alpha 60. And a lot of strange things happen. He finds Dixon, but Dixon is killed by a seductress third class. It's funny that they have here different classes of seductress in the city. And then he meets the daughter of Professor von Braun, and Natasha, and he starts to kind of fall in love with her, but of course, love is forbidden, so she doesn't respond. And eventually, he manages to destroy Alpha 60 by reading it a poem which it cannot comprehend. It doesn't understand poetry, and it burns out its circuits. And I thought that was interesting. And of course, the last thing that happens is Natasha is sort of, once the computer control is gone, she realizes she's not just this kind of robot. She's an individual, and she can express her own emotions. And she says, "So Tim, I love you." So that's the end. Really cool film. It's inspired a lot of music and videos and all sorts of things. And again, I highly